And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon, and today I am talking with Daniel Tolson. And Daniel, thanks for taking some time to be with me today.
Mate, it's a pleasure. It just hit 10:30 p.m. here in Taiwan. It was the first shower I've taken for the day, so I've been hustling all day, and I snuck in a shower before I got to meet you.
That's awesome. Well, he is clean and ready to go. So, Daniel he's an international thought leader. He's a business influencer, author of multiple books, including a couple, Set That Goal and Social IQ. Daniel's really considered the world's #1 business coach, specializing in emotional intelligence, which I want to unpack that a little bit. His goal is to teach 1 million business owners how to catapult their influence, accelerate their impact, and unleash new income levels so they can accelerate and multiply their results. Daniel, wow, those are lofty goals, dude. I love that. It's going to be a great conversation. Thanks for being here. Start off, if you would, Daniel. Just tell us a little bit about the journey that you've taken to get you to where you are today.
Well, I was put into a special class at school, and it was called the Space Lab. And I thought I was going to be an astronaut. But what I learned later on, it was the special class for the kids who are off the bloody planet. So I had learning disabilities, I had physical disabilities, my bronchial tubes had collapsed, I couldn't breathe properly, I had all the allergies you could imagine, my leg used to collapse when I'd run, so I'd look a little bit like the local Forrest Gump. I had curved spine, and the platelets in the cranium were pushing down on the left and right hemisphere of the brain, and I was tone deaf, and I couldn't see properly. And so that's how I played the game of catch-up. And when you're that far behind, you think you're coming first.
Whew, seriously, nobody's around. Where is everybody?
And that's my very humble beginnings. And it was an interesting time in my life because as everybody else was learning, they seemed to learn and get rewarded, where I would learn and get punished. So I thought this school thing was like you're learning and it's not fun, and you make a mistake and you get punished, and you're worried about making another mistake and trying and failing. And so I really was turned off education. I knew there was something within me, but I wasn't getting rewarded for it at school. So my breakthroughs started to come once I started to get into the business world. I come from small business background. And once I got into business, I realized that all those things that I wasn't getting rewarded for at school were rewarded in the business world, especially small business.
Yes. Wow. So you had a circuitous route, not a successful school system, right? But you got into the business world and realized, in a sense, the rules were different. You got rewarded for different things, and you were able to really excel through the business world. And somewhere in this, I do want to talk about the fact that you've authored multiple books and how that's played into the fact that you are an expert, but it really gave you a platform. And we were talking offline and how you were doing some traditional marketing with webinars and things. And well, you weren't converting until you had the book. So let's talk about that and see where that takes us.
So my first job out of school was a real estate agent, and my goal was to speak to 500 people per week. And I thought, that's a lot of people. That's 100 a day, but I'm going to make all these telephone calls. Majority of people aren't going to be home. I'm going to knock on their doors from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. People are going to be at work. And I used to scratch my head thinking to myself, this industry is screwed. Like, these people have got a screw loose. You expect me to walk around the street and knock on the door and put in all this effort, and it's not going to be rewarded. So I had this big frustration when I was in real estate. But I'm resilient, and I played the game, and I kept knocking on doors. But I was always thinking, there's got to be another way.
Yes.
And my mentor, he said to me, Daniel, in this game of real estate, what gets rewarded is your attitude. So you've got to have the right attitude. You've got to have a will to win attitude. You've got to have a hard-working attitude. And he said that your attitude will outsell experience 10 to 1. And it was true. It was true. If somebody met me, if I got through the door, finally, yes, I could win. But I couldn't get enough doors open fast enough. And we were doing letterbox drops, and we were doing letter campaigns and all these things, but they just didn't get results. And so after my time in real estate, I started a clothing business. And this was the time before Facebook when we used to have things like MySpace. And I said to my brother, I said, you know, what we should do is we should stop making videos on VHS. And he said, well, why don't we put them on DVD? And I said, look, I think that's still a slow burn. Why don't we start putting clips on the internet? So we started marketing ourselves on the internet, and all of a sudden we could get in front of our perfect buyer. And they would see these videos, and it was stimulus response. They watched the video, you got a like, you got a comment. And as I built my business, I started to build it on the back of social media. But then I started to realize in the knowledge game, we have an air product. And it's kind of you talk and air comes out of your mouth. There's nothing tangible about it. And I was saying all these wonderful things, and I'd start these webinars. So it's 2013. I've started my business. I've got 1,500 leads, and I run my first webinar, and nobody shows up. And I was disappointed, and it hurt, and I wanted to give up. I was like, I've just done all of that work, 6 months of preparation, and nobody showed up. But I was so glad I hit the record button. So I just stored that recording over there. 2 weeks later, I did another webinar, had another 500 registrations. I was ready to go. And I even built a soundproof system for my microphone. I got a Coca-Cola box and I stuffed it with egg cartons. And I thought, maybe if I have better sound, they'll come to the webinar. And I got all jacked up and nobody showed up. But I'm so glad I pressed the record button. And I just put the file over there. So third time lucky. I showed up. I increased my marketing spend. And again, nobody showed up. I said to my wife, I said, this hurts. This really hurts. But I'm glad I saved the recordings. So I saved those recordings and I listened back to them and I said to myself, that is some great knowledge. Why don't I try something else? And so around about that time, 2013, I heard a lot about ebooks and they were very accessible. People could download them at any time. And I thought to myself, why don't I take this knowledge and put it into a book? So I wrote 3 books and I started to promote them. Hey, I've got this book, download it for free. The downloads started to come in. I did not sell one copy online. I didn't sell any. I just gave them away. I thought, if I can exchange this for an email, this is great. Then one lady reached out and she said, do you have a printed version? And I said, I don't, but if you really want a printed version, I can get one out to you. She said, look, I'll pay for the books and I'll pay for the postage. So she sent me $14 via PayPal. PayPal probably took $2 of it, and the printing probably cost me $20. But I sent it out to her, and this was my breakthrough moment. Through all of that pain, I found somebody who was interested in my work. And what I realized, and she said to me, Daniel, she said, I'm so glad that you printed this out because I hate going to webinars. I hate listening to podcasts. I hate listening to that. I just like to read. And she said, could I hire you? Now, that one deal there ended up being worth about $100,000 to me.
There you go.
And it was off the back of the book where I'd never sold a copy other than to her for $14.
Right.
But it produced about $100,000 worth of coaching reviews over a period of 7 years. I acquired a client and kept a client for 7 years. And that worked. And then it happened again. Somebody else said, Daniel, I really like your book. Can you send me a copy? So I sent it up to their business and he said, I love this book. He took it around Australia, took photos of it on the aircraft with him, and then he hired me. And I've been working with that business still today, active today, since 2014. And they're great spenders. And they spend multiple 5 figures every year. And having a book was the easiest way to get in the door. That was the problem I had in real estate. I couldn't get in the door. But now the book gave me a way to get in the door and for people to make their own assessment on me without being sold, because the book doesn't sell. It educates. And and I know what you say, if they like the book, they take the next step and they say, I'd like to learn more. And if they get a good vibe, they'll say, how can we work together?
That's right.
And so just like you teach your clients, it worked for me. And I didn't even know what I was doing. So if I didn't know what I was doing, and you're the expert. Your clients must have wild success.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said there about, and you're weaving everything that you talk about influence and impact, and you're weaving that through that story, which I appreciate, because so many business owners that I talk to, Daniel, they don't like the fact that they're salespeople, right? That has such a bad reputation, because I think in our minds, we play this movie of all those bad, sleazy salespeople that, have all the techniques, and they twist your arm and they make you buy something you don't want to buy. And that's not what we do, is it? It's educating. It's allowing that prospect to take steps towards us to say, if I have something for you, right? So talk a little bit about that, about how business owners can influence people, can elevate their impact by being themselves and guiding that person like you did with education.
I love what you said here about sales. I grew up in a family business, and we were pawnbrokers. We were selling. We were selling all the time. And who did my mum hate? Bloody door-to-door salespeople.
Right, exactly.
And the door-to-door salesperson would come in and they'd have a big smile on their face and holding their bag of brownies, and they'd say, hello. And my mum would say, get out of the shop. And she'd have these big signs, no hawkers.
Right.
And I'd say to mum, I'm like, have you ever heard of law of attraction? Oh, not in here. Get out. We pay the rent. And I said, Mum, you got to at least show a little bit of respect to these people. And so what came along with that was this thought that had been imprinted upon me, that we don't negotiate. So imagine this. You're the local pawnbroker. You're the local second-hand dealer. You're the wheeler and the dealer. And my mum says, no negotiation. And so what was imprinted upon us, and it was in signs in our business that said, no haggle, no hassle. And so here we're running this place where you wheel and deal, and you're not allowed to negotiate. So for me, I get it. I don't want to be sold to. I don't want to be pitched. I don't want the latest closing line and try to manipulate these words with a little bit of spin. I just want people to be direct with me. And that's what I like. Tell me what you got for me. Tell me how it will benefit from me. Is it free plus a profit? If it's free plus a profit, sign me up. Let's go. Yep. And so what I discovered was that in the new world, people are very well educated. And people can find out more about you and your business and what you do at a click of a button than you could possibly ever figure out about yourself.
That's right.
And they want to do the research. They want to make the decision. The greatest fear that a buyer has is a fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
They fear making a mistake. It doesn't matter if it's $1 or $1 million. It's still a fear of making a mistake. So I had to ask myself the question, how can I catapult my influence? How can I stand heads and shoulders above everybody else? How can I walk down the street and people say, that's Daniel? How can I get them to see me and say, that's Daniel? Well, I figured that telling my story and putting it into a book was really important, because I used to be an Australian champion athlete and I would always be in the magazines, but I was sponsored and I was a professional writer and I was winning competitions. But if I wanted to put a picture of myself in a magazine or run an ad, it was going to cost me $5,000.
Yes.
And I knew inside of me that people weren't going to pull out that advertising piece of paper and look at it for the next 10 years and go, wow, what a great advertisement. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I thought if I wrote a book, it's very hard to throw away a book.
Yes.
Now, people give me books when I travel around the world and they write nice messages in the front cover. And out of guilt, I just store these books. I can't throw them away. It's like bad juju. And so they sit in the cupboard, and every time I open the cupboard, there's the author's name.
Yes.
And there's the title of the book. And I'll give you an example. My uncle, my first mentor, he gave me a book by Brian Tracy. Now, Brian Tracy's written about 75 books. And on the front cover of the book, he wrote, "To Danny Boy, this is your blueprint of success." Now, at age 19, I didn't know who Brian Tracy was, but I read his book and I went, wow, this is good. And I traveled around the world, and I have not been back. I left my home country when I was 21, and I really haven't been back since, and I'm now 42. Mm-hmm. And so I took this book around the world with me. And then one day I was in Australia, and a friend of mine said, hey, have you heard of Brian Tracy? And I said, yeah, the Eat That Frog guy. And he goes, he's looking for business partners. And I couldn't believe it. I said, I've read his book. I know his material. And all of a sudden, he introduces me to a guy who knows Brian Tracy. And all of a sudden, I'm in business with Brian Tracy. And then because I knew his stuff so well, I was invited over to San Diego to speak to 250 of his customers. And I got up on stage and spoke to him. Now, my point here is the power of that book. I was introduced to a name at 19. I carried this all around the world, and at age 36, I became a business partner with him. And I'm still talking about that book today. Now, I did leave that book somewhere and somebody else owns it now.
That's right.
But I remembered that name. And that business deal to Brian and his company was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it even worked for Brian.
Yeah.
So,
without question.
And so for me, it was like, well, how do I catapult more influence? And I just thought to myself, if I just do what successful people do, which is write a book, tell your story, then I'll get the same results.
Yeah.
So I went down that path. And now people recognize my work, people quote my work, and people have my books in many different countries around the world thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
So it was perfect.
Well, and I love that because it weaves so many things. It's influence in back in your real estate. How are you going to talk to so many people? A lot of times we say a book is your silent sales force, right? I can multiply myself by giving copies of my book away, just like you had free downloads of my book. That's what we teach as well. We teach mail a book to somebody because, as I say, it's sacrilegious to throw a book away, right?
I got to tell you a story about that one.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, because you're just hitting all the things about impact and influence. Tell us about it.
So I've got to impact my local area. So I've gone back to Australia. I'm starting to build this business here. And I'm trying to get indoors. But you can't go door knocking anymore. It just doesn't work. People are just too busy. They're sick of people knocking on the door and pitching to them. So I thought to myself, how do I get inside of this business? So I wrote a book, and it was called Free Drugs for Entrepreneurs. Killer title, Free Drugs for Entrepreneurs. So I thought to myself, this is the best title, and I could see myself having this impact in my community. So I went down to the bookstore and I bought brown envelopes. You know those brown envelopes that you could imagine these gangsters passing to each other under the table full of cash?
Yeah.
So I got brown envelopes that. I got my book, and then I got a designer to make me money. And the money looked like Monopoly money. So I had the same colors as the 500s, the 100s,
Sure.
the 50s, the 10s, the 20s, and the 1s. And I got this money, and I thought to myself, how much does the average real estate agent earn per commission in my area? And I tallied it, and it was about $10,351. So I got $10,351 of Monopoly money, and I shoved it into the envelope. And then I put a copy of my book in there, Free Drugs for Entrepreneurs. And on the front of the envelope, I wrote to the local real estate agent. So if his name was Michael DeLeon, I would have put to Michael his address. And I didn't say who it was from.
That's great.
So that was the first step. I sent it out, and then I scheduled my call. So 5 days after, I'd ring the real estate agents and I'd say, Michael, it's Daniel. And they'd say, Daniel who? And I'd say, did you get the drugs and the money that I sent in the post? And these people are going, who the hell is this? And I'd say, Michael, I sent you drugs and $13,531 worth of money in the post. Did you get the brown envelope? And people are saying, what the hell is this? Is this a prank call? I said, no, serious. Did you get the book, Free Drugs for Entrepreneurs? And a stack of Monopoly money. And they'd piss themselves laughing. They'd roar, and their heads would laugh. And they said, I did get that, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And they said, well, what's it all about? And I explained it to them, and about 1 in 10 people invited me into their business to talk to them. And about 20% of those people purchased. And I remember one guy purchased $30,000 worth of coaching from me just by using that exact method. Yeah. And it probably cost me $500 in postage and printing. And I won a $30,000 gig. And he loved it because it was character.
It was character. It was doing things differently, right? And I love how you mail that out blind to build that curiosity, follow it up. And business owners can model that, whether they have a book or not is irrelevant. It's the idea that you said, how can I, which is one of my favorite questions, how can I get into that business? Well, there are 1,000 different ways. You chose one that was kind of radical, which usually works better than the rest, right?
100%.
And you made an impact in their life. You were able to influence them, paid way more for the advertising than you ever put into it, right? And I think that's the thing is, and it was a lot of fun. Too many times in business, we make business too hard. And it's like, just relax a little bit, have some fun, do something else, and look for ways to make an impact, to influence people. And in doing so, you're generating income that you can just do it over and over and over again, right? What do you teach business owners when they come to you, Daniel? I mean, what are they typically struggling with? I mean, I'm sure lots of things, but like what 2 or 3 of the big top issues that most business owners are struggling with, and how do you help them kind of find that breakthrough?
So my clients are normally problem aware. So they wake up in the morning and they feel stuck and they don't know what to do next. They have no idea what the solution is. Mm-hmm. They have no idea what the problem is. They just say, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do next. Now, eventually when they find me, they're looking for 3 things specifically from me. They don't want me for anything else. They want 3 things. They want to catapult their influence. They want to accelerate their impact, and then they want to unleash new income levels. So the first problem that they're having is that they don't feel influential in front of their friends and their family, and they want to become more influential. The second thing is that they want to accelerate their impact, and they have big dreams, they have big goals, but it just seems to take forever to achieve it. And they look at their parents and they say, I don't want to grind for 40 years like my dad and get the gold watch when I'm 60. I want the gold watch when I'm 40. I want it now.
Right.
And then the third thing is they want to unleash new income levels. And one client said to me recently, he said, Daniel, $5 billion in sales is not enough. I said, why not? And he said, because on $5 billion, I can only impact 2 million lives. He said, it's not about the money, it's about the impact. And if I want to have these impact goals, then I've got to increase my sales so we can feed more homeless people. So they're the 3 things that they want for me. And for me to be able to help them catapult their influence, they've got to get rid of their fears, their doubts, and their limiting beliefs. And so what I did, Michael, I wrote a book for them. And the book's called Mental Detox: How to Stop Self-Sabotage. So when I give them that book, they go, that's the problem that I couldn't articulate, and this book articulates that one particular problem. And then they say, how can we work together? The second thing is when they want to accelerate their impact, I've written books like Set That Goals, because that just solves one specific problem. And I say, well, now that you want to accelerate your impact, you've got to learn to set your goals. And then when it comes to unleashing new income levels, I wrote them another book, and it's called How to Win Sales Now. And I say, that's the book that solves that problem. So along their journey, I will give them a different book to educate them based on where they are at in my funnel. So if it's influence, this book. If it's impact, this book. If it's income levels, we want to talk about sales. So that's how I educate them and work with them.
Daniel, that's just shy of brilliant. Okay. I've heard a lot of strategies and tactics. We interview a lot of coaches, but having one book that's focused on one thing to get you to that next step, to solve that issue, is brilliant. Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
I love the name Mental Detox. Wow. Because isn't that what we need to do, is just clear everything out, reset. And I was talking to a guy today. I meet him every Monday for a Bible study, and we were talking about Elon Musk and just all the things he's accomplished, but more than that, how he thinks. I don't know that he has any limits in his thinking, right? And as my friend and I were talking, I thought, well, that's good, because there really are no limits except self-imposed limits, which is what you just talked about. And I talk with business owners every week, just like you do, who have self-imposed limits. They do things that their industry has done forever, and they're wondering why they can't break through. And many times what I do is I look at a different industry. I bring in a successful strategy from another industry, apply it to theirs, and they find breakthrough. They think I'm brilliant. Well, I'm just looking differently, right? Do you find that happening?
100%. We get caught in our own comfort zones. We get trapped in our own thinking. And you can't think outside of the box when you're trapped in the box. It doesn't matter what anybody says. You're still thinking inside the box.
Love it.
And that's the key with a coach. I think for me, I just have so many wonderful experiences with coaches and trainers in my life. When I was growing up, my knees weren't in alignment. I've had multiple operations on my knees. My hips have been clicking for 41 years, and I'm going to be 42 in July, so six months short of my whole life. And I've been trying to solve this problem. And I found one personal trainer, and all he did was to show me how to squat differently. And I've been working with him since about October last year, and my lifetime hip problem has disappeared just because he brought me one new insight. Now, I should have the insights because I'm the former Australian champion athlete. I'm the 3-time state champion. I'm the former X Games competitor. I'm the expert. I should know this, but I don't.
Right.
I don't know what I don't know. And I'm ignorant. And I'm happy to say that I'm ignorant because when I asked him for support and help, he can see my body totally different than I can see it. I can see my reflection in the mirror, but it doesn't mean I can accurately assess how I'm squatting.
Right.
And since working with him, my 41 and a half year old hip problem has disappeared. And so it just shows that if somebody brings you one new idea at the right time is enough to change your life.
It is. And this is a rhetorical question, right? What is that worth to you? How much is that one piece of counsel worth to you, right?
It's a great question, and priceless is not the answer. It's worth millions of dollars to me because the amount of pain that I've been in for the years. I remember when I was working with Emirates Airline, I would work on the aircraft. I co-led a team of 17,000 cabin crew. And I would wear patches on my back. I'd put deep heat on my back. I would stand and favour one leg for a 16-hour flight. I'd spend the next day in bed. And I was always pretending everything was okay. But I was in pain. It's worth millions of dollars to me. My father's just about to have a hip replacement. And I think to myself, maybe that disaster could be averted because of this one thing. So it's literally worth millions of dollars to me. And if I'm paying him $5,000 or $10,000 for the advice, if you ask me 3 or 4 or 5 times more, I'd happily pay it. Even though I've got the result already, I'd still pay just to have that support in my back corner.
Right. And people who listen to me, my audience, they understand that I always talk about the value of coaches. I've got 3 coaches in my business speaking into me because, all right, Daniel, I'm a marketing guy, right? But I have to have marketing coaches looking at my business just for what you said. I'm too close to my business to make good marketing decisions, right? Mm-hmm. We all struggle and we all, in a sense, stand on one leg for 16 hours a day to alleviate the pain that we're in because we are stuck. We don't know what's going on or how to get there. And we need somebody like you who can look in and say, okay, right now, I want you to read this book and we're going to get you to that next level. Yep. And a coach has a unique way of seeing because, well, the analogy I learned years ago from a marketing guy, he's like, a business owner is standing inside of like a Coca-Cola bottle, looking out, trying to read the label on that same bottle. It's insanity, but we all do it. Versus saying, Daniel, what's that label say? And you're like, well, if you do this and this, you're going to get breakthrough, right? So that's the value of somebody like Daniel. And I really love the way you've partitioned your program there to help different people based on what they really need. And so talk to my audience, Daniel, about how to get a hold of you, what would be their next step if they're sitting here, and what are some of those, go back and talk about those indicators. If they're listening to this and they're feeling stuck, you said, what would be their next step to gain some more education from you, to move in your direction?
Probably the best example is I'm working with a doctor at the moment, and he's from Malaysia, and he's been in the educational faculty for more than 25 years. He's all the way up to a doctor, and now he's doing his professorship role. And he says, Daniel, it's insane. I've got all the knowledge, I've got all the skill, but I still don't have what I want. I said, what do you want? He says, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you doing now? He said, I'm teaching entrepreneurs how to be entrepreneurs. And he's the leading doctor in Malaysia. And he says, Daniel, it's crazy. I know all of this, and I just can't do it for myself. So before I met him, he had taken 117 personality profiles to try to figure out who he was, why he thinks and feels the way that he does. And finally, he met me, and he used one of my behavioral assessment tools. I showed him his behavioral style. I explained to him his strengths and his limitations. And he said, Daniel, I've been trying to figure this out. I have completed 117 documented case studies, and the only thing I didn't have along the way was my own guru, somebody to explain it to me. And so I explained it to him, and now what's happened is he's now started to unleash new income levels. Instead of just working in the university, he can now see opportunities outside, and he's getting hundreds of millions of dollars of funding in projects, while simultaneously he's now pursuing his own ventures. And so he's finally got self-awareness, and that's the first pillar of emotional intelligence. Once you get self-awareness and you understand why you think and feel the way you do, then you can start to regulate your emotions. You can overcome those fears, those doubts and limiting beliefs. And it's after you break through those fears, doubts and limiting beliefs that your motivation goes up, your resiliency goes up, and you're more likely to give it a go. And so for him, he's trying so many things that he thought he had tried in the past 25 years, but he'd never actually done it. And so that's where my clients come to me. They say, the only thing that's standing between me and what I want is the bullshit story I keep telling myself why I can't have what I want. And then my job is to help them break through the fears, the doubts, and the limiting beliefs. And then they go on their merry way. And they get that influence, they get the impact, and they get the income. So for people, if you're feeling like that, if you feel like you've got all the knowledge and you're still not chasing your goals, if you've developed all these skills and you're still not achieving your goals, then there's only one thing, and that thing is the mindset.
Yes.
So if you want to learn how to break through that negativity, come and check out my Unleashed Masterclass. I actually just wrapped it up at 10 o'clock tonight. I had my shower and I jumped on here with you. So I only finished it about 60 minutes ago. And I have it every Monday night here in Taiwan and multiple times across America. So maybe early morning for you in America.
That's awesome. Where would they go to find that, Daniel?
Come to my website, unleashedmasterclass.com.
Excellent. Well, I'm convinced that when you go there, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to have one of those aha moments, because I've had them multiple times in my life when I'm struggling, when I'm stressed out, when I'm hitting that barrier. 99 times out of 100, Daniel, it's between my ears, right? It's how I'm thinking. And I don't know who it said, but the level of thinking that you have when you incur a problem is not the same level of thinking you have to get through that problem. That's a bad analogy, but it's something like that.
The thinking that got you into the problem isn't the same thinking that gets you out of the problem.
That's right. That's beautiful. We can quote Daniel Tolson on that.
Michael, can I just share an example of, I'm just thinking about one of my clients. I've got a client. He's got 200 employees and he can't get the doors to open up for him. So in 2018, I was introduced to him, and I showed up to his office and I took my Louis Vuitton bag with me, And when I introduced myself, instead of giving him a business card, I put my hand in my Louis Vuitton bag and I pulled out a signed copy of my book. And I said, my friend, it is so nice to meet you, and I wanted to give you a signed copy of my book. He almost fell over. He couldn't believe that somebody gave him a book. He'd never had this in his entire life. And he read the book. He was so blown away that he hired me. And one of the first things that I asked him to do, Michael, was to go and write his own books. So we went and wrote 3 books. They weren't bestsellers. They weren't New York Times bestsellers. It was just for the intention to give that to somebody when he met them. And he started to do this, and the doors started to open. Today, he gets invited onto national television, onto international television. He gets a seat at the table, and now he's introduced as an author of 5 books. The doors open, and he reported to me the other day, he said, Daniel, you wouldn't believe it. Because the doors are now opening because of this book, one of my clients just saved $100 million. I saved them $100 million on a fraud claim. He said that book opens doors and it gets me a seat at the table. So if you haven't got a book yet, do it, because the ripple effect is phenomenal. Today I get introduced as an author, the doors open. I get on the television shows, they say, this is an author. I walked into a business and they say, I've read your book, when can we start? So if you haven't got your book yet, make sure you get it done. Priority number 1.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. I could not have said that better. You're right. You are spot on in everything that you've said today. And I want to say thank you for being my guest. I've captured all of this. It's going to be in the show notes so people can go take your masterclass to learn from you. You've got opportunities to get in copies of your book and reach out to Daniel and see how he can help you break through those mental barriers so that you'll have greater impact, unleash more income, and be more influential in all that you're choosing to do so that you can reach more people with the message that you have. So Daniel, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.